Well, hello again. It's week 12, in fact, day 77 of the legislative session. Today I just want to talk a little bit about the operating budget, and then I'm going to do a brief overview of my own personal bills, just so you can kind of know some of the other things that I'm working on besides resources and the budget. Most of you probably read that the operating budget has been a little bit held up on the House side. It is my hope, I'm very hopeful in fact, that they'll be passing the bill over to us very soon, the operating budget that is. I serve on 3 finance subcommittees for the Department of Natural Resources, Environmental Conservation, and Health. So we have been working on those budgets, even though the big operating budget has not come over yet. But I'm very hopeful that it will come soon. Senate Finance Committee is ready to receive the bill and to focus on that bill. So it should move pretty quickly after it gets here. In terms of which bills I'm working on personally, my main focus has been healthcare bills this year. And I've mentioned that before to you. The main focus on healthcare is how to reduce the cost. We all agree that it's pretty outrageous right now. I have 2 bills dealing with pharmaceuticals, so those are your medications. Medication costs are really a huge part of healthcare costs. Up to 20% of healthcare costs is in the pharmaceuticals. So Senate Bill 37 would allow the Board of Pharmacy to inspect wholesale distributors. When you go to your pharmacy to pick up your prescription, those pills were purchased by your pharmacy from a wholesale distributor. We have only one wholesale distributor in the state of Alaska. The rest of the distributors are in the lower 48. Our Board of Pharmacy is not authorized to inspect those wholesale distributors. It's important to do that because we don't believe this is prevalently happening, but they could be distributing contaminated medications or things that are not actually what they're labeled to be. A contaminated medication situation actually happened a few years ago, and several people died. No one in Alaska. It was an injectable medication used typically for back pain. But it does happen, and so my bill would authorize the Board of Pharmacy to actually inspect and approve wholesale distributors. So that's one bill. I'll move right along here because I have several. Senate Bill 38 deals with pharmacy benefit managers. These are middlemen between you and your pharmacy and your insurance company. So their original purpose was to help the insurance companies and the manufacturers to agree on costs for medications. Well, they have developed into a middleman that captures a huge amount of money out of this system, so that you, as the end user, are paying more than you need to for your prescriptions. In fact, the contracts that your pharmacist has with the prescription benefit manager, or PBM, prohibits your pharmacist from telling you how you could get that medication for less cost. This is something my bill is working on. So that's Senate Bill 38. That one actually just passed out of Senate Labor and Commerce today. But I've been working with Representative Guttenberg, and he's carrying the same bill for me on the House side, and that's already gotten to House Finance. That's its last committee before it goes to the House floor. So we're pretty excited about that. He's done a great job moving that bill along, and it will soon be over to the Senate. So those are the pharmaceutical bills. I also have Senate Bill 108. This is a bill that I'm carrying on behalf of the State Medical Board. It would help streamline their licensing activities. That doesn't really have a lot to do with healthcare costs directly to you, but it would help the approval of physician licenses to happen more quickly. Senate Bill 112 would reform workers' compensation so that it actually focuses on the injured worker. The bill would put a cap on how much attorneys could charge, and secondarily would put into place best practices treatment guidelines for the injured worker, so that guidelines would be put in place that have been proven to actually restore people's health more quickly. Senate Bill 120 has not gotten a single hearing so far. It is in Senate Labor and Commerce and has not moved at all. I'm working with Representative Tarr on the House side. She has the same bill. What the bill would do for naturopaths is actually describe their practice. Right now, it's very vague and not very helpful in our state laws. And so Representative Tarr and I have been working on this bill to define the practice of naturopathy more clearly. I have Senate Bill 124. This is, I call it the Born Alive bill. It essentially would prohibit the dismemberment of an unborn baby if that baby could be delivered and have a chance to survive rather than be aborted. And that abortion technique actually is called dismemberment. I'm working with Representative Kathy Tilton on the House side on that bill. I have Senate Bill 128. This would use some of the tax money from marijuana to create an education and treatment fund. We want to make sure that our children know that marijuana, while it may be legal to sell on the street corners now in stores, is actually not without significant damaging effects, particularly on children's brains. Representative Clayman on the House side has the House version of that bill. That bill right now is in House Judiciary and is in our Senate Finance Committee. And then we have two bills. I have two bills that would rescind rules that were put in place by the state's bureaucracy. So these were not policies passed by the legislature. These are rules that were put in place by the bureaucracy. The first one has to do is Senate Bill 129, and this is the 80th percentile rule. I've talked about it before on one of these videos. This requires extremely high reimbursement for medical services by insurance companies. Consequently, because the reimbursement requirement is so high, insurance companies have had to increase their insurance premiums on you and I to be able to pay particularly specialists. So this bill would actually rescind that and put in place a different rule that would lower that bar a bit more. The bill has gotten no hearings in the Senate Labor and Commerce Committee. I am going to continue working with stakeholders over the summer on that. But one bill that is moving along is Senate Bill 169. This would open the door to more behavioral health care services for everyone. Particularly, however, for Medicaid beneficiaries. We have the highest suicide rate in the U.S. We have exceedingly high domestic violence and violence against women and children in this state. And it has been substantiated that the perpetrators of these kinds of things actually have conditions that behavioral health could really help, could really ramp down, help them deal with issues either in their past or in their present. So there's a rule in place right now in government that requires that a psychiatrist be present 30% of the time, that a clinic with clinical social workers, psychologists, marital and family therapists, professional counselors, where those clinicians would be practicing would have to have a psychiatrist present in the clinic 30% of the time. The problem is we only have 85 psychiatrists in the entire state. And out of that number, I'm not sure how many of those psychiatrists are still practicing. So as you can see, this has resulted in long waiting lists, very few clinics that can serve behavioral health needs. In fact, I'm hearing about 2 and 2.5 year waiting lists. So these folks are going to our emergency rooms where the services are not available either, and yet they can't discharge these individuals because they are having a behavioral health crisis. In any case, my bill opens the door so that more of these other clinicians, professional counselors, Maryland family therapists, clinical social workers, and clinical counselors could provide those services without a psychiatrist present. They would have supervision by a physician who could either be present in their clinic or communicate with them on a communication device. So this bill has got huge support. It's actually going to be heard in the Health Committee over on the House side this week. So it's already passed unanimously on the Senate side. So those are some of the bills that I'm working on personally during this legislative session. I'm hopeful that a few of them are going to actually become law and reduce the cost of our health care and make our health care more accessible. So thanks very much for listening, and I'll see you next week.